Hey everyone, welcome to SF Garnish Music Production. This is a special day where we're going to be doing a DAW shootout for the first time between Ableton, Logic, and ProTools. If you guys don't know what a DAW is, it's a Digital Audio Workstation. And exciting news is that we got all these awesome cats over here, talented teachers and producers. Joining us today, we have Lorenzo, Kyle, and RoAn as our representations of our DAW and how they like to work within that DAW. So I'm going to start off by just kind of walking us through a few things here. And one of them is to get into our teacher page on the SF site. This is our main page of all of our different teachers, and you can go to sf.garnishmusicproduction.com to check out all of these teachers. So please do that. We're talking to these fellas right down here: RoAn Gibson, Kyle Boydston, and Lorenzo. We are a school that teaches music production in general, audio and video, but our producer program, 120 hours, the Academy, 430 hours with studio time at Soul Graffiti Studios, and our short courses are 18 and 36 hours. If you guys want to join us, please contact us at sf@garnishmusicproduction.com, and we'd be happy to work with you. So starting things off, this is Ableton right here. And we just want to get into just some basics of this DAW, and it has arrangement and session view. I believe Logic, Kyle, you can let me know if this is true. Logic has session view now, correct?
Yeah, we have a live loops section.
Live loops.
100%, yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So this is actually going through my whole system now. So when I start messing around with the sounds, you guys are going to hear my voice, right? So this is something that you can do for a live stream to get the different effects that you want, to change up your voice to whatever you want to. And that's something that I think is pretty advanced in regard to this DAW specifically, is to be able to create live sounds and bring your session to a live show, which is why it's called Ableton Live. So we're going to start off with Lorenzo. Lorenzo Gordon is down in LA. He's one of our SF Garnish teachers down there. And let's see if I can get to the right screen here. Yes, Lorenzo, Kyle, and RoAn, you guys are all here. Go ahead and say hi. People are checking you guys out.
Hi there.
What's up,
Hey.
what's up?
Hey, hey. And so, Lorenzo, what we're going to go into is you're going to share your screen, and the goal is that you're going to go through the best of the best. You probably have Ableton 11 now that you're working with?
I do.
Awesome. Any new tricks in Ableton 11 or things that you like from Ableton 10, you're welcome to do, bringing up sounds that you've already created or new sounds you want to share. And so I met Lorenzo through Will McGid, Balkan Bump, and both amazing, stellar teachers at SF Garnish. And right away, I listened to your production, and I knew you had a really good ear for music. And then after that, I saw you teaching, and I just really thought that you really had a knack for bringing that around. So thank you so much for being here, Lorenzo. Go ahead and take it over.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here. And I'm actually going to be working in arrangement view of Ableton, which I prefer as the studio rat producer. And one of the things I love about Ableton overall is just obviously the workflow. A lot of people say it feels very digital to me. Copying and pasting audio is very natural. Like I can take that bit and put it over here, which feels a little bit easier than some of the other DAWs, in my opinion. Because I can do that not just one piece of audio, but with whole sections of songs, and it can really get kind of crazy from there. Another thing I like is the clip view and the way that Ableton works with warping audio. I think it's like within the industry, a lot of people tend to talk about it, especially electronic music and warping samples or resampling yourself. I find that these warp modes and moving audio physically and visually is really helpful for me. So with that in mind, I took the liberty of creating certain loops that were routed with a lot of groups, and you can see I took some audio and I reversed it here, which is one click in Ableton, which is really helpful, especially I think in like EDM, because you need a lot of variety to your synth sounds, and you're just trying to get crazy sounds out of it with that style of music. And that's sort of why I like Ableton. It feels like creatively, it's splatter painting, it's impressionist, it's got all these capabilities. But yeah, and as you can see here, I've also got a lot of like grouping going on. And that I find really helpful. That is like a cheat code in the DAW world. Avoiding bus routing, except when necessary. I can add effects on top of effects. And that's essentially what I've done here with this clap. Is I took 2 clap samples and I spread them with a stereo pair, which is a pretty common practice. And then I decided that those 2 different samples needed one effect on all of them. So I grouped them and I added a little bit of compression. And then I ended up adding a kick to the track. And I decided that both my new clap sound going through this group and my kick needed some drum bus for some saturation and compression. And just hitting Command G a bunch of times really helped me get here without having to know where I was going in the first place. I didn't anticipate this necessarily. It just came naturally. But yeah, that's really one of my favorite things about Ableton is the warp, the copying, how visual it is. It feels digital, like I said. Some of the other DAWs to me will feel sometimes a little more like an analog console mixer, and this one feels like Adobe Photoshop or something like that, you know. It's really cool. And in fact, I'm gonna get into some features that come with 11 and make a little beat. I think it'll be pretty cool. Another thing I love about Ableton is the way you can group your instruments, your audio effects, and I'm going to demonstrate that here with this group, which is 2 stock Ableton synthesizers, 2 different ones, creating different sounds, and I'll play those right now, I think. Just gonna mute my drums here. So yeah, you can hear in this instrument rack, it's playing random notes, and I'll play the other sound as well. Cool. So I was able to group these with that same Command G and create this unique sound out of these 2 different synthesizers on one channel. And now I'm gonna end up affecting that later, and it's gonna affect both those sounds instantly, which I find really helpful. Another feature of Ableton that I really like is some of the MIDI controls, which I'm going to utilize here. So I'm using a random generator, which is taking this MIDI input and changing it every time this note is being played. And so we're going to make kind of like a random beat. The computer is going to sort of generate for us what we're working with. which I think is pretty cool. And something that I don't see in too many other audio workstations in terms of this kind of signal processing. So I'm gonna go ahead and unmute these drums, and I'm gonna demonstrate this 11 feature called chord, which also affects MIDI, and it's gonna make our random beat pretty interesting. So here's without chord and with chord. So my random from this note is kind of making a computer chord progression, which I think is really cool. Taking chord one step farther, you can create kind of click of the button chord progressions with this random function gets really, really cool. And this is new in Ableton 11, this chord feature. But I'm gonna demonstrate how changing chord gets crazy. So I'm basically making kind of random chord progressions at the click of a button without any intention of what I really want. So it's kind of this random nature. And that's really cool, I find, for resampling and electronic music, everything from like lead sounds to more ambient textures will utilize this kind of random parts and then taking little bits and messing with those. So I added an arpeggiator here for rhythm, and I've also made a bass patch. What's really cool with Ableton is I'm routing this one MIDI note with this random to both this kind of pad sound, and I'm also routing it now to this bass sound. So I'm gonna get kind of an in-sequence random beat, which is kind of cool. And I'll play that. And obviously with a major chord and without adding a little more variation, it's kind of funny, but you can see, I think, where this is going. And this kind of workflow I find where I'm processing one MIDI clip through two different channels, I find that that in Ableton is really easy, and that's, I think, pretty cool. Another way I like to use Ableton, and this is also new in 11, this is the MIDI clip view, and I've really been loving, they have a random velocity feature, which makes sequencing drums like a breeze. So I've got a hi-hat here that I'm gonna solo, and it's straight right now. I'm gonna add some groove later, but first I'm gonna add variation just with a click of the button with velocity. So I'm selecting my clips and I'm command dragging, and now it's gonna randomly choose values, velocity values for these notes within this parameter. So it's already kind of got some swing to it. Now if I add a groove, which is also really easy in the clip view, it's gonna sound like a swung drum player is playing. And the other cool thing is that this random velocity function is really random, so I could listen to it forever. It's never gonna be the same. And so if I wanna go and resample this, I could go and resample this hi-hat loop until I get a variation that I like, and I think that's pretty cool. The other couple things that I like about Ableton is the automation editor is super cool. This is new in 10. They added different shapes, which I found is very useful on the go instead of having to draw in with different points, I've got these shapes. I also like how I can add and subtract different automation windows. So if on one channel I want to see all these variations, I can click add, and now my automation is going to be mapped there, which is pretty cool. I also have been really liking the MPE features of Ableton, and I believe Logic also offers this MPE capability, and it has for a while. Maybe you want to correct me on that, Kyle?
I continue explaining, and I might be able to respond.
Okay, well, MPE is a multi-polyphonic expression. I don't know if some people might be familiar with like the keyboard and stuff. It's basically, and I have one here and I can demonstrate. It's basically a way of playing keyboard with more feeling, and I find more and more studios are having them. That these keyboards and these different MPE capable devices. And so basically, if I can slide my finger along the keyboard for expression. And if we look here, this is a Ableton Suite synth. It's already mapped to MPE, and I have full control of the parameters on my keyboard, my MPE keyboard within the synth. So if I started mapping this to a filter, say maybe this slide, it can get. There's all kinds of crazy things, and Ableton has already got it like set up with some of its in-house devices, which I find really cool. But yeah, that's pretty much most of the things about Ableton that I noticed that are different from some of the other workstations. But yeah, I don't know, maybe Kyle, you want to talk about Logic and share what you think is different? I'm going to go ahead and stop this.
Great, yeah, I think that's super cool. The MP, back onto the topic of the MPE. I've never really used like a controller. When you continue to talk about it, it's like, oh, okay, I know exactly what you're talking about. I would assume that it would, oh, my camera's gonna go off. Okay, there it goes. It's gonna capture any like control input either way, and we can adjust that. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen really quick as I talk about that. But there's definitely, I haven't, as far as I know, of a feature that maps it out the way that you were able to view exactly what it is, what each control is going to be like modulating in that sense. Like for example, we have all of our like MIDI channel, controls and such. So I would assume that that's where we would have to go in and per se like map that, and then we can just make sure that the controller is actually inputting those.
Right, and I know that some like third-party synths like Serum and stuff have MPE capabilities.
Yeah. So into Logic,
Awesome.
I was going
Actually,
to
prior to you coming in, Kyle, I just really wanted to thank Lorenzo for doing a great job of going so deep into little pieces and nuggets, which is really what we're trying to do, is this shootout, where like, what are the best nuggets that you like with your digital audio workstation? So once again, that was Lorenzo Gordon from LA, and he was doing Ableton. We're about to get into Kyle Boydston and Logic Pro, and Kyle, go ahead, take it away, man.
Thank you, Justin. So I figured I would kind of go over some a a method that I've been sharing with a lot of students and friends that are first just now diving into music production. And a lot of people that come to me, they're always asking, oh, how are you making all these melodies and creating all these different types of samples and such? So I've been kind of putting together a multi-step process to, without any musical experience or really knowledge of the subject, to at least move in a fashion that you're efficiently kind of pumping out material that you could potentially be inspired to use. I have an example here pulled up. I want to show you this and explain kind of what happened, but I also want to kind of go in and use go through the process. And it really does incorporate some of the new features in Logic 10.5 and up, which we'll go into as we move forward. So I'm just going to go ahead and play this. And the point here is that it took about maybe less than 5 minutes to put something together. There was no playing of the keyboard. There was no thought put into anything other than a lot of randomization, manual randomization. Lorenzo was talking about a lot of automated randomization. But let me just go ahead and play it for 1 second. And it's super simple, just somewhere to kind of to move forward, I guess. So hopefully I'm good on the volume of that. So very simple and ambient, I would say. Let me kind of explain what is going on here. First, we're going to start off with a MIDI region, and it's super easy to just create new regions just by clicking in our arrange window and pulling up a region like such, and then we can open it up in the piano editor, double-clicking and then clicking and selecting which region we'd like to edit. So now we have all of our MIDI information here. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I typically just recommend or just say, go ahead and type in or write in, draw in, or even record if you're comfortable, if you have the capability to, all natural notes or white keys. And we can see that these light gray spaces are going to be the natural keys, and then the black ones will be the sharps and naturals. So a lot of randomization. I'm just going to go ahead and draw in pieces here and such. And in this case, we're just thinking like short notes, depending on the instrument you're choosing. And this is Alchemy, Logic's the larger or the kind of the flagship synthesizer that comes included with Logic. So I simply just found something that was rather short in release, meaning when you tap one key or a small note is played through MIDI, the note doesn't last so long or carry over or bleed over into the next. So I just found a simple sound, hadn't touched anything in the settings of the synthesizer or anything like that. So we start with something like this. And I'll go ahead and actually just make something new, just for the example of being able to do quite literally anything. I'm just going to go ahead and play some notes. And I like to have a bit of variation in highs and lows and rhythms. We'll just do 2 bars here. So completely random, didn't have to think whatsoever. Now we'll play this. Command U will enable our cycle mode, and we'll be able to hear what that sounds like. Okay, it works. Completely random. The key there is that we're staying in the C major scale, so we're going to be pretty safe with playing random notes like that. And now here's where it gets fun, and one of the new features in Logic 10.5. Pretty simple here. What we're going to do is now create a sample with this super easily by click and dragging this region, and we're going to create a new track by pulling it under every other track in the track list. And we're going to throw it into the quick sampler, and we're just going to use the original. It's going to take the original audio and throw it into a sampler instrument. Now, we have this new sampler. Older Logic users will remember the EXS24, super old school, and they finally updated it, no more than a year or so ago. So we have this feature, Slice, and it's going to slice up our sample, and it automatically maps it out to our MIDI keyboard or our MIDI piano roll. You'll see here C1, D1, D sharp 1, and so on. So here now we can trigger pieces of the sample by just playing these individual keys. I'm going to make note of this here, put the polyphony into mono so that no samples or pieces of the sample overlap. And now we're back into the randomization. And of course you can go ahead and do this to taste, and you don't really have to be so random. But the point is, of course, for a new user jumping into music production, this is just the workflow that really worked, that I've seen work for others. In case you were, thinking about which DAW to jump into, Logic is a great user-friendly one. So I'm gonna try to find some variation here and see what it sounds like. Okay, so I can use that. I'm gonna mute this lead here, the piece we started with. And so now I'm gonna go ahead and slow that down. And so we're noticing that they're pretty short. It's chopped up pretty small. If we got a cake and we were given like the little tiny slices of cake, nobody likes that. So let's bring down the sensitivity, and it'll actually give us larger pieces to work with. Of course, now in this case, we kind of ran out of the range since there are less samples to choose from. So I'll just make sure that these are all okay. Not my proudest, but I don't want to do much to it. I'll loop that one. Cool, we have a rhythm, we have something going for it. So that's one of the things that you can do in Logic 10.5 is with the sampler, super powerful, where you can go from something like this and then build on top of it. And I'm going to actually pitch this one up an octave by using the pitch knob here, super simple, and so that we get some different tone and different sound from the instrument. So the clicks are, of course, going to be dependent if you take the time to go in and kind of find the perfect start position for that sample to be played. Now we can I'm going to group these together, just like how Lorenzo was talking about groups. We have a function called creating a track stack, and in this case we'll use a summing stack, which automatically routes these tracks into an auxiliary track that we can use to add effects to anything that we create the track stack with. So, and then this is one of my favorite plugins that comes free with Logic, comes included. It's these multi-effects. We have Fat Effects. Super great plugin. I do a lot of hip-hop, instrumentals and things like that. So this is great for kind of just an instant kind of vibey kind of plugin with this XY pad here. And you'll notice that I'll play this and you'll see what happens when I use this. For me, right there with the filtered kind of the high pass, low pass, kind of tightening up, super great for any kind of really any instrument. It will almost always sound good there. And then we have automatic saturation, some drive. We can choose between different types of distortion if we want. I'm going to turn the bass enhancer off and compress it a little bit heavier in the output, and then we'll even slam it a little bit harder. Great. We also have another one that is one of our multi-effects, which works like a step sequencer used to modulate different parameters like, let me pull this step effects up, like reverb send, a filter cutoff, a pan, things like that. For the sake of time, I'm just going to find a simple preset and just see what we can come up with. And I'm going to throw this on an auxiliary track that we're sending both of these signals to after it's been filtered with the fat effects. And then we'll go ahead and use the step effects to kind of create even more dimension and movement. And I have no idea where this is going. So now we're really getting somewhere where we have a lot of interesting material to work with. And we could even grab this piece or both of these pieces here and create more sampler instruments and keep developing and using a sliced sample super easily. I'm going to go ahead and show you now what I would do for drums if we were going to go in that route after creating this piece here. We have also a new step sequencer region, kind of like pattern region, which instead of using the piano roll, we can now easily create a step sequencer region or pattern region and trigger whatever instrument we are using. So I'll go ahead and show you kind of what this looks like. We have our pattern here. We can change our steps here. I'm going to put it at 32 just so we have some variation. We have this drop down menu where we can change individual note velocities, note repeats for those like super cool hi-hat rolls. Actually, I'll jump into the hi-hats real quick just so we can I like to use the pattern region for hi-hats. Super quick, super easy. Let's see what this sounds like. So right away we can have, this would be more familiar for like an FL Studio user, just kind of being able to lay down your pattern for hi-hats and drums and stuff like that right away. I'm going to add some rolls, super easy, and I'm going to, again, the key here is randomization and anybody being able to make music with Logic Pro. So I'm going to add some rolls. Let's put and the number will indicate how many times that note plays in the space of, in this case, 16 notes. Cool. I'm going to now convert this to a MIDI region, which I can now edit just like any other MIDI region, and I'll even kind of give it some movement. And we're just kind of playing around here. And now I'm going to look at some automation on this. And we're going to automate this sampler. And automation isn't my favorite thing about Logic, but super useful still. And we're going to actually automate this attack parameter and just see what this happens. I like to do this to add a lot of movement. And randomization is key. We're going to make some drastic change. As you can see, I'm kind of overwriting things by accident here. I could zoom in a little bit more, whatever. Okay. And then we can trim all of this down with this trim feature here that will trim all of your automation points to scale. So now we're just ever so slightly adjusting this, automating the attack on the sampler. Let's make sure I put the right thing. Yeah, amp envelope attack. So as you can see, automation, you choose what you want to automate, and we're going to go into the sampler, which is our instrument. We'll go into envelopes and envelope attack. You can even make it more drastic. So super great for, again, just being able to step in, and that's what I really preach, is just that really anybody can make music with the power of all these different digital audio workspaces. Really cool. Logic is just super great to really jump into. It feels like a familiar face because it's designed by Apple. Well, I'll hold off on that. But it's an Apple product where it's very cohesive with the rest of your Apple products. And it just feels very friendly and like familiar, because a lot of people nowadays are using Apple products. That's kind of what we're all producing on for the most part, and things like that. So to me, it just feels very not too crazy and not too complicated.
I feel like it reminds me a little bit of like a video editing software, or something like that. It's a little more traditional kind of timeline workflow.
100%, yeah. And for $200, you get everything you could possibly need. There's no, pay $900 for the full suite of plugins. It's $200. It's an app. You can download it on all your devices. It just feels very like an app, and I feel like apps are what we're all used to, and being all about the user experience and friendliness. So as you can see, it's super simple to just kind of go in and draw things in, just looking for where you want to create your regions. And it's, I always like to describe with colors, in anybody that doesn't know, if you go into display preferences, you can go into, let's see, tracks, and have it to, instead of the green regions all the time, which I hate, you can have it auto assign like random colors using all 96 colors or 24 colors. I always get a lot of comment, or like a lot of like questions like, how are you coloring all your regions? Like, why do you take all the time to do that? And I'm like, I really don't. Auto assign there, the godsend feature, thank God. There we go. So there we go, a super simple beat, and really from nothing. I was just kind of talking about the features, what you can do with like sequencing, the sampler, a little bit of just the awesome sound that comes from the Alchemy, one of the main synthesizers of Logic Pro. And yeah, you can really just go crazy with not really having to think about it. As I was more just thinking about what I was going to say out loud than what I was kind of creating.
Nice. It sounds good, man.
Yeah.
It sounds good. I have a question for you. In regard to the key of that instrument that you randomized, was that already set in a key, or was that all chromatic?
So this, it's all in chromatic. I just chose, I always just kind of advise, like, if you really don't know what you're doing, to play it safe and stick with all the natural keys.
All the white keys.
Yeah, all white keys. And then, of course, if you wanted to, we also have some MIDI effects, real quick, things like an arpeggiator. And what I'll do real quick is copy paste this region, create force legato these notes, trim note end of following notes, force legato, and then now I'll use this as, I'll pitch this up an octave as well, and then I'll show you the arpeggiator. So
nice.
Of course, we could do more with changing the instrument very quickly. We have chord triggers. Kind of crazy, and then transposing. So you could really go kind of crazy with just a few clicks, and you're making music, and it's, you can put it into whatever key you'd like, and no one will ask how long it took you or how hard you tried. If it sounds good, it sounds good. That's the key, of course.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, so Logic, I don't really know too much about Logic, but ever since learning more in the past, I would say 5 years or so, I feel like they've really upped their game in regard to being a DAW that is almost, it's like an instrument, right? It's like you're able to really think of an idea and then implement it. And you're really doing that with this demonstration here of just like, as you're talking, you're just kind of making up random stuff, and it ends up coming into this like awesome beat, and that shimmer on top you just did with the arpeggiator. I was thinking, as we get through this, you and Lorenzo should consider at the very end just doing a demonstration of one of your songs you're working on, if you're open to that. So just consider that. I just really want to say thank you to both you guys for taking the time here. We're about to get into Pro Tools with RoAn. If there's any questions, please let us know in the chat. And hey, RoAn, nice eyebrows, man. Cool. And yeah, just keep us posted. Thanks for joining us on the Zoom. And for everyone out there in the digital world, please comment, like, subscribe to our pages. And these teachers are available to teach you individually, but hopefully in our group classes at SF Garnish Music Production. We're doing classes pretty much year-round, starting every month to month and a half. And what we're doing here, oh, Kyle, for some reason it's staying on your view instead of my view. How do I do that?
My camera just died. I'm replacing the battery.
No worries. How can I make it follow? All right. Spotlight everyone. There we go. All right. So what we want to do here is just get into the different possibilities you can do with your digital audio workstation. And just to start off, Lorenzo took us through a lot of awesome capabilities of randomization with wavetable and different synth effects. I really liked is it the MPE you were talking about, and with your finger? The Push 2 has that same fingering on it as well. So I definitely encourage, if you are in the Ableton vein, to get the Push 2, because Ableton makes the push, but there's also other MIDI devices that go with it. And then I like how you picked it up right where he was at. Is like, how do you randomize in Logic? Which is actually a question I've always had, is like, Logic, I don't know if it had that. And you just told me how to do that. So very cool that we were able to jump into that ability across the DAW. Now, I started on Pro Tools myself, and I moved over to Ableton just for the usability of it, kind of as a sound painter. That was my DAW of choice. But we just have to pay respects to Pro Tools, as this is where I think Logic and Ableton are getting a lot of their things from. They're kind of looking over the shoulder of the Big Daddy Pro Tools. So speaking of the Big Daddy, we got Roan Gibson over here.
Oh man, that's a hell of an intro. Except for that, like, now I have to talk about Pro Tools, which is like the least sexy of the DAWs right now. And that comes as somebody, I say that as somebody who has Pro Tools fever. Like, I don't ever want to use anything else, and I only use anything else when I have to. I actually have been splitting my time recently evenly between Logic and Pro Tools, because Logic comes with a whole bunch of instruments and just stuff ready to go. Ready to make music, and it's really simple. I am going to keep using Logic until I get like an awesome MPC setup and can sort of mirror all that same functionality in an external unit, because Pro Tools just doesn't come with it. But I guess I'm supposed to dive into what Pro Tools does come with. So let me share my screen.
And also part of that too would be that you know, there's a lot of things that we're getting into is kind of high level randomization and like, how crazy can you go? And there's a lot to say around just using your ear and having quality VST plugins, or, you know, and
there's a lot, I think with Pro Tools, there's a lot to be said about how much they've dived in to making the routine elements of being just an audio engineer, not necessarily a producer, not necessarily a songwriter, but an engineer, fast and incredibly functional. So it's kind of it's the odd one out in this conversation, because it's less about getting a song going fast and more about, like, I just pulled up this song literally at the start of this, that I recorded it yesterday. I have not touched this session since I recorded all the instruments for it yesterday at my studio, and there's like some things that I can show you that you can do incredibly quickly in Pro Tools that you just cannot compare. They just can't compare in Logic and Ableton. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say, Justin, before I get going, but
no, it's great, man. Yeah, go for it. Just yeah, I think that just the general idea of that all these DAWs now do grouping the same. And one of the things that would be nice to see is there something that we can find in Pro Tools that Ableton and Logic don't have yet?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Perfect.
Okay. I'll get to that about halfway through because I've got a list that I'll run through, and if I don't run through it that way, I'll get totally disorganized. But the core of what makes Pro Tools the thing that I go to when I'm mixing or editing any music, I will bounce everything out of Logic into Pro Tools in order to go through it. And it all has to do with how fast it is to move things around. When you want to zoom in and you want to zoom out, much like you might find in like Premiere Pro, it's one keyboard shortcut. I can move or zoom out horizontally from everything, zoom in horizontally from anywhere with just one place. My hand doesn't have to move. You can't see my hand not moving. But there's these little things like that, like you'll see up in the left-hand corner of Pro Tools that it is switching between slip, grid, relative grid, and shuffle mode. These are all right at my fingertips without moving my hands at all in the editing process, which I know in Logic you have to do. It's like command arrows if you want to be zooming in. It's not as easy just to switch between grid and slip and shuffle style editing modes. And this is not the sexy stuff whatsoever, but it really, like, I can't underscore how much I feel like when I'm with a client and they're asking me to go through and make changes, to move stuff around. Oh, I want this riff to be somewhere else in a song. These tools make me feel like I'm a superhero and I can make all their dreams come true in Pro Tools. And if I'm in Logic, I'm like slow. It's fumbling. It's not as like fast and easy. I'm like moving my hands around, and I use both consistently. Actually started on Logic, so it really has to do just with the ease of using Pro Tools. Kind of to Lorenzo's point about Ableton, the waveform view in Pro Tools is really wonderful. I find it really easy to go through and just edit drum beats, see what's going on at a really detailed level, work on phasing issues, and it's just fast, and there's kind of no two ways around it. And when you're talking about the downside, the biggest downside of Pro Tools, it's the crazy cost. It's so expensive. It's stupidly expensive. I think that they're going to have problems long term if they don't find a way as a company to bring in new users into their DAW, because a lot of people are just not going to it because of the price difference. But when you're doing a lot of editing work, when you're having to mix a lot of music rapidly, I mean, these tools can save you an hour on your total mix, or 30 minutes on your total mix, which means that you can mix another song that day. You can mix 5 instead of 4, or 4 instead of 3, which ultimately, as somebody who mixes a lot of music, just leads to more income. So it's hard to know when those equations are going to balance out, but it's an important thing to think about when you're diving in. Like, what are your ultimate goals? Is it just kind of songwriting and production, or do you want to get into the world of being a professional mix engineer or professional recording engineer and really be able to do this stuff like at the fastest level possible? There's some other things kind of in that conversation, or in line with that conversation, with organization. Kyle was saying something about how people ask him if he's really goes through and like does all the colors for each track. And honestly, I want to know, do you know people who don't color scheme their sessions? Because I lose my mind if everything's not to my color scheme. It's like I can't get around. Oh, you're still muted.
It's the green bubbles by default. Logic users will just leave it green in the regions.
I think that's just a Logic thing, because Ableton, I know, has been default random colors for a while.
Oh, it's those little weird small things that keep you from searching around for stuff, and you just visually where the things are supposed to be. So Pro Tools does colors, but what's cooler than colors is a thing called, and another really unsexy thing called session data import. And I don't know if you can see this on the share screen because it's not technically a part of my mix window, but there is a control, which if you're not seeing it, it's not that sexy. But basically just up in my files, I went to an import setting called session data import. Yesterday, I recorded a bunch of I recorded a bunch of songs for an artist named Zeminar Aliyumshka, who is just a person as creative as his name would imply. And I only got to mixing one little bit of his music last night. And just before leaving, I just got this one song. It was acoustic guitar and stand-up bass, feeling really good. I didn't get to do any of the work on stand-up bass in this song Kyoto that I pulled up for you. But in the time that I've been talking about this, I have gone to Session Data Import, and I have found my stand-up bass mic, and I have imported a new track without any audio, and it is importing right now, maybe going a little slow because I am doing Zoom as well, and maybe a lot slow because I'm doing Zoom.
How's that going, RoAn? What is the cost of Pro Tools currently?
Currently, you can get it for like $600 to buy the program outright, which they don't give you all the plugins and all of the features that you'd like, and you have to buy a new subscription to their updates every 2 years to actually use it. So it's $600 to start, then $200 a year after that. If you want to do the subscription, it's $35 a month just off the bat. So we're talking $420 a year, and you know, it's a lot. It's like, to me, in my mind, when you're comparing that to $200 for Logic, to what, $600 I think for Ableton right now. I mean, it's a kind of an astronomical price, and I think they're really banking on the fact that they're the industry standard, and it's hard to know how much longer they'll be the industry standard unless they change, something. Mm-hmm. So in the time when I was talking, I uploaded this new track from another thing. You'll see there's a bunch of plugins on it. It's a sound that I got on the exact same bass from another song. Now, I didn't do anything out of the session. I didn't have to save that channel. I didn't have to create any presets for any plugins. I can literally go to any Pro Tools session that I have ever created, and I can import as much of the track information as I want. And this sounds like an unsexy feature, but when you're mixing a bunch of music, but someone gives you 5 songs and the drums are all recorded at the same time, being able to just instantly pull up all of that stuff and not have to do any additional work. You don't have to go save it in one session. You can accidentally click out of one song and then open up the next song and bring in all those same tracks to just instantly get the sound you want. It's pretty huge. So like, for instance, this is what the upright bass sounded like when I left. Cross my fingers, it's not embarrassing. No, it's nice. It's like super low endy. I didn't really do anything to it going in, but I know that this other track that I worked on and mixed is going to be a little closer to where I want it to be. Bringing out that mid-range, a lot of the low mids, having it punch through a lot more, and just kind of ready to go. Versus so it's just little things like that are really fast. Another one of the kind of like the more sexy thing that you get from Pro Tools when you get the subscription is their new Heat program, which kind of falls in line with what a lot of Pro Tools does well, which is mirror the analog world in a way that feels very continuous for a lot of engineers. So if you are working in a studio with a lot of analog gear, with old school console, or you understand sort of what a console does in terms of saturating tracks at multiple stages in the production process and creating kind of uniform sounds, things like the Heat plugin in Pro Tools can go a long way to adding a little bit of saturation to every single one of your tracks that you go through it. So you can access the controls through the not through the mix window. So again, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll toggle it for you. This is without any heat. And then I'll turn it on with it. So now without it, a little less life, just a little, not quite as much bounce to it with it again. and subtle differences, but when you're mixing a song, being able to press one button and just turn on the heat plugin and have a gentle tape-like saturation go to every single channel on your DAW, including the master channel and all of your aux channels, and not have to do a whole, like, adding plugins to every single one of those, it makes the experience really fast. It takes care of a huge first step that I am going through in any process of mixing a song. Just adding a little oomph, a little saturation to everything, because chances are whatever you're recording these days is not going to be tracked through a giant list of analog gear at a professional recording studio, because that's super expensive. I'd say, again, the last thing that I have on my list to talk about that I think is probably the thing that Pro Tools does better than anything else right now, that is just an incredibly fast thing, again, for people who are mixing and editing a lot of music really quickly, is Beat Detective. Beat Detective is basically a quantization tool that, I'm less familiar with Ableton, so maybe they have something similar, but it's just unreal how quickly I can make I can just align all of my drums without any phasing issues, with very minimal complication, in a brand new session I opened up. So for instance, we'll take another look at the beginning of this track and pay attention. I mean, this drummer is really solid. He's hitting pretty close to the lines. He's got a good groove. He's got a good feel. He's in time. But in a lot of music these days, we want a little bit more than a cool groove. We want, especially if this is a dance tune, if we want to up the dance quality to it, I am probably going to go through and, in any other DAW, have to go through the process of being like, okay, let's take this one and let's move it right there. It's just like this painstaking process, or it can be. So in Pro Tools, I'm just going to tab over to the transient of the one that I'd like to pick. I am going to separate all these. I have all my drums grouped already. I'm going to continue to tab the transient over to basically the end of that bar, and I'm going to go over to my Beat Detective. I hope it's showing you the window for Beat Detective here. But
it is.
Oh, thanks. So I have a few quick options here. I'm just going to do it really fast. I'm going to capture my selection. I'm going to analyze it. I'm going to choose slightly higher resolution because I want it to hit all those middle points in there on the subbeat. I'm going to separate all my clips, where now, if I should so choose, I can, I've got them all separated out now. I can choose them individually. Let me bring it back up. Separate all my clips, and I'm going to go to clip conform. I can pick a swing, I can pick a strength, and then it just really fast aligns them all to a grid. Edit smoothing, smooth it out, adds crossfades and fills in the gaps for everything. And you can hear really fast how, when you go through this measure into the next measure, it goes from being like super on to a little groovy. I can do a larger section if y'all would like to see that as well. How about we just do from here to there. Group template, capture section, analyze it, separate them. And you don't have to do all these functions, but it's cool to see everything that it can do. Conform them, smooth it out, and all of a sudden, everything is super on the grid, it's very quantized, and it sounds more professional than it did a moment before. And I mean, you can do a whole song in basically that same amount of time and have, you know, maybe a couple edit points that you might have to go back and fix. And, you know, to me, this is like, it's not so much the sexiest thing in the world. It's not as cool as like rerouting 10 tracks into some sort of sub sound so that you get some crazy like kind of effect. But a lot of what I really gravitate towards the engineering and sort of the mixing side of things in a heavy way. And these types of tools are just like absolutely indispensable to me. I mean, they just make the situation feel very fast and very effective. So I hope Pro Tools seems a little sexier now. I hope it gets sexier in the future.
You just made it very sexy, RoAn. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, I hope they figure out how to make it more sexy in the future and how to bring in younger engineers, because I'd love to see it continue to be the industry standard, because I don't really want to have to, you know, I don't like working on anything else. But in the meantime, I'm going to use Logic until I get myself a machine studio set up.
Totally. Please keep your window up for a second as we talk here. Yeah, so that was really cool that you were able to get into quantization in Pro Tools, because that was one of my questions is, can you quantize, and how well does it do with the dips and fades? And it looks like it does a really good job. One thing that I'm seeing on your screen is how easy you can see all of your plugins.
Yes.
And this is something that in Ableton, which I love the most, I'm totally biased, you have to actually program your Ableton set to have that feature. You have to actually go into a back page and implement a file to then make it look like that in session view.
Well, and it's not even just that. I mean, you can see all your you can see all your plugins, your inserts. You have control over how many you see, so I can I can get rid of them very easily without having to go into a bunch of things. It's just right here, left click. And then you also get that with your sends. So at least in a session, if you're recording a bunch of music, I mean, I tend to have a system of like, you know, sends to effects are all on are on A to E, and then sends out to headphones are on F to J. And there's a lot of really great shortcuts. Like if I want to make the volume of all of my sends, like this one is just a dummy I set up, but say bus 1 was headphone mix 1. If I wanted to make the send from every single one of these channels mirror what was happening in its volume, I can press I can press Option Command H and choose, okay, everything that's in the FKJ or FGH one. I can do just volume, volume pan, volume mute. I can do automation. All of a sudden, this is going to be negative 8.7, same as its original volume. So setting up headphone mixes, I mean, some of these things that are sort of the basics of working in a studio environment are incredibly fast. I mean, just like can't compete in Logic, as far as I know, at how quickly you can make people feel comfortable in a studio environment, which, you know, again, that's different than producing. It's different than songwriting and arranging. But, you know, if you've got a drummer, an upright bassist, a guitarist, and a vocalist who are all trying to get a vibe together really fast, you know, then there's nothing else I'd want to use to make them feel comfortable and make them feel like they can just be creative.
Nice. I also like how in the upper left-hand corner, all your tracks you can see really clearly without having to expand and compress anything at all. Is there something like that in Logic, Kyle?
Unfortunately, you would have to have each track, you know, sized down enough to see every track, or you can open up the mixer. But of course, if you have enough tracks, you're gonna have to be scrolling through the mixer or scrolling up and down through your range window. Yeah,
and that's where Ableton and Logic are similar, and Pro Tools has that advantage of that ease of seeing all the features that you just went through, RoAn, and then also on the left side, all your tracks listed in that same order, so you can then scroll around and go exactly to it. So I do like that feature. I also want to mention too that
Ableton does have that feature, but it's worth mentioning. In the
it does.
side
Please let me
menu,
know. How do you do it?
If you're in the side view menu and you go current project, it's got a drop down of exactly what you're looking at in your project, but in like a side menu format like Pro Tools.
Perfect. Okay, so you have to expand it out, similar to all those little triangles.
Yeah, you got to expand it.
Nice.
But it's there. It's an option.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, and every time that like Logic, Kyle, you were talking about certain features, I was like, how would that happen in, these different DAWs? And similar with you, RoAn, is like how you would do your headphone sends, or you would quantize in these different DAWs. And a lot, like I said, all these DAWs are very similar. It's just which one is best for you. And the two things that I stand out as like probably the thing that you should probably choose is either the style of music that you're going for, right? And what type of effects you're going for. I would say electronic music, I would say definitely Ableton has upper hand there. Hip hop music and the effects of Logic are pretty amazing. Acoustic recording and the easy feature that you were just mentioning, RoAn, in Pro Tools, that might be your DAW of choice. And then also, what is the cost, right? So we know that Logic is $200. It's like you can't go wrong with $200. That's
but only if you have a Mac.
Oh,
so you have to buy an expensive computer.
Oh, okay.
Fair point. Yeah.
I think you could probably do it if you downloaded Mac OS onto a PC, but that's like a crazy workaround.
And technically not legal.
Yeah, I've also considered doing that, like, being able to build a PC at a fraction of the cost and be able to load Mac OS on there, but
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually the best thing for streaming, right? It's like they always say PCs for that reason. You can load your RAM, etc.
I actually bought a PC for that. I bought like a pre-built, build your own PC off Craigslist at the beginning of the pandemic for streaming, like for $300, and it blows my MacBook Pro out of the water. And I converted all of my Pro Tools situation over to that, and it runs so much better than my Mac. I mean,
wow.
It's just like, and that it's little things like that make you feel like, man, Pro Tools have my back. And then if you just forget about the monthly payment, then
right.
Yeah. So going back to that price point of Pro Tools, you mentioned it earlier. It's like $39 a month, or $600 up front with $200 a year after that.
Yeah, I think you get 2 years for the $600, and then it's $200, or maybe even $300 a year now after that. Mm-hmm. And if you do that option, you don't get the heat plugin, which is a huge part of my process now. And you actually only get a limited selection of the plugins that they offer with a subscription.
Wow.
Because Avid just really wants to make people feel bad about being Pro Tools users and their Pro Tools addiction.
So
it's
like,
really annoying.
So how do you get all the features that you like the heat feature? How much would that cost?
It's $35 a month, unless you get it. I think usually like certain times of the year, there's deals that you can get.
Okay.
Like where it's maybe $25 a month if you buy it at the certain right time of the year or something.
Nice.
Yeah, it's stupid. I mean, it's the same product, and it's just buy outright versus subscription, and it's like the same cost in the long run. But if you just buy into the subscription model, then
it's worth it maybe. Yeah, and then Kyle, you were saying with Logic, $200. It also comes with like 45 gigabytes of samples and amazing kind of built-in effects. So that's pretty amazing. And then in regard to Ableton, we haven't really talked about the price point there. I believe it's $799 for the suite, which is I would really encourage people to get the suite of Ableton 11 because it has a lot more involved in regard to what types of plugins you can do. I think wavetable, the different effects and samples. People that come through SF Garnish get a 40% discount. So students, if you want to sign up, we could save you guys like $300, I think it is, off of Ableton. And just a little shout out to Logic and Pro Tools, wherever you are, people that have contacts out there. maybe someday we'll have a discount for those as well. Probably can't with Logic because it's already so cheap.
Yeah.
Probably can't with Pro Tools because Avid
wants money.
It's money. They're the old dogs that want their money. Yeah. Well, and so I want to also mention that where I go to do a lot of my mixing and mastering is one of our other teachers. Actually, is Oz Fritz, Grammy Award-winning producer, lives down the road over here, and he does a little bit of Logic, but mostly Pro Tools. And so I've been kind of getting back into the Pro Tools world because that's his DAW of preference, and he's super quick around using his VSTs, how to do his crossfades and his shortcut codes. And that goes to say that whatever DAW you use, you'll learn those shortcut codes. You're going to learn your workflow and get up to be able to run a session. So at Soul Graffiti Studios, we have Logic, Pro Tools, and Ableton. And it really depends on, what style of music, what engineer you have, what your connection is, and what you're doing, what you're going for. And hopefully you can even run your own session, which is kind of what we're trying to do, is help artists be their own everything. So I just wanted to thank you guys and just say congratulations on being the badasses of the future. And I just, any you guys learn from all this at all? Sorry, too much effects. From the other DAWs, I'm just curious.
I definitely picked up a few workflow things, like with the import. Can't remember what it was called. The
session
effects.
data import.
Session data import. Yeah.
Just a whole channel. You just load a whole channel strip.
But without the actual audio.
Yeah, I mean, you can load basically any part of a previous session just automatically into your session. Whether that's that could be time markers. It could be or like markers throughout the song if you're working in a similar song or you have a similar format. It can be effects. I have a Pro Tools session that's literally just a bunch of different effects auxiliary channels that I like to use. And it's like clean, bright vocal reverb, my favorite room reverb, my favorite giant room reverb. And it's just all in one Pro Tools session. And so I go to that whenever I'm just looking for preset things. But if I haven't created those presets already, but I know that I liked something that I was working on 2 days ago, just snap it right in.
Right.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's almost like in Ableton, you would create your own rack of all your custom instruments, group them together, and then save those in your file, which is up in your upper left-hand corner. Is there something like that for Logic too, Kyle, where you can group all of your best effects together for certain instruments?
We can save presets to individual plugins. We can also save entire channel strips and load those up easily. We can create folders and stuff. I personally do a lot of vocal mixing for artists, independent artists, and so I have personal name here vocal premix, and then name here reverb, specific things that I've found that I'll need to save and use later. But yeah.
Nice. So workflows and how to do it in the different DAWs. Awesome. So in the chat, I included the bios and information of each one of our panelists here, starting with Lorenzo, who did our Ableton first session, mostly going through randomization and how to create cool effects and wow us. And then we went into Kyle Boydston on Logic Pro, and following suit and learning randomization in Logic. And then RoAn Gibson took it home with Pro Tools and getting into session and learning how to quantize and be able to do it in a quick manner, and the organization and the feel and flow, which is such a big part of your digital audio workstation, right? It's like, what do you want it to look like? What you want it to feel like, so that you can really have the best experience playing music and doing your sampling or recording other people or your own stuff. So really want to thank you guys for coming out and taking the time here. Once again, these are all teachers at SF Garnish Music Production. And I would like to say, is there any last little bit here that you guys want to add in before we head out?
Well, I think it's just interesting. I find all the DAWs are kind of becoming more similar, especially Logic and Ableton, and they're ripping a lot of stuff from Pro Tools back in the day. And you can do anything with all of them. It's more really look and feel, I think, in my opinion.
See, I actually respectfully disagree. I think that I feel like that you can do any of the same thing with them, but it's important to remember that this is personal opinion. It's important to remember like what your goal is, because you can do things faster on certain ones than others. You can do all the same things, but like session data import and loading a pre-saved channel strip in Logic are the same things, except for that in Logic you have to have saved that channel strip before, where in Pro Tools you can just pull it up. So you can do all the same things, but in one, if you didn't do the work ahead of time, then you have to go close out of your Logic session, pull up a different one, save it, close it, pull up the original one, load it. And ultimately, like as a hobby, music is one thing. It's one thing to make music as a hobby. You can do anything any way you want. Right. But if you're working with people and you want to make a career out of this, then it's important to find the thing that allows you to do whatever you're going to do fast and efficiently in a way that makes other people go, damn, you know what you're doing. 2 cents.
Awesome. And that's what I'm talking about, a shootout, you guys. Like, we're not here to agree, right? We're all different DAWs. It's like, come on now. That's awesome.
I mean, it's worth noting, like, I use Logic, and I definitely use Pro Tools when I'm in, like, the physical studio space and stuff. And the knowledge, like, transfers, for sure. Yeah. I think, but yeah, no, I mean, I think, like, at the end of the day, you're right. If I'm, like, recording instruments, I wouldn't necessarily recommend Ableton. I'd probably say Pro Tools. But that being said, we could make, EDM in both, or gypsy swing or whatever it is, in any of them. They're processing audio, I think, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Here, yeah.
Totally. Actually, back in the day, I think I started Ableton, I think in 2005, and it was 3.1 version. Okay. And the processing, there was a delay every time you put something in there, and it wasn't up to par. I would say 2011, 2013, it was about 8 or 9 came out, and that was when I was like, this is in the same field of Pro Tools. Logic really wasn't even on my radar at that point, but I was just always trying to get up to where Pro Tools was, which has been this industry standard for 2+ decades or more. And actually, really the first digital audio workstation, I would say, translated to the computer, that's been mass produced or whatever. And I think that what came out in 9, 10, and where we're at with 11 now, is that doing acoustic instruments, full band tracking of 18, 36 tracks, you can now do in Ableton as well. And I think that the view of what your preference is in regard to just how you like to see things. So I'm hoping that what people get out of this is you got to see the visual of each workstation, what it looked like, right? Where the sends are, where the volumes are, how session and arrangement view are looking, and also what direction you're trying to go into, and also what your budget is. But hopefully it's not just off your budget. It's mostly your style of music, maybe your connections of what studio you're working at, right? If you're working at Hyde Street with you, RoAn, you're going to mostly be in Pro Tools, right?
Well, yeah, and we have a C24 console, which is basically just a controller console, large format controller console, and there's a hack now. You can use it with Studio One, but its kind of main functionality is with Pro Tools. So it's like if I use Logic, then I lose all 24 faders and pan pots that I have available to me in the studio. And there's a lot of studios with specific things like that. Totally.
Yeah. So that's the benefit of kind of knowing a little bit about all the DAWs. Hopefully hone in on one DAW, learn it really well, know your workflow, know your shortcut codes. And if you learn your one DAW, going to another one isn't that hard, right? It's not foreign language. It's a language that you will know. So if you decide to go to a foreign studio that has a different DAW, don't worry about it. All right, you guys. I think that is a pretty awesome session right there. I'm gonna take it out with a little bit of effects here of the logos we have for SF Garnish. I'd really like to thank our panelists, RoAn, Lorenzo, and Kyle. And we're going to get into classes here at SF Garnish Music Production. Our next class coming up is going to be in mixing and mastering, sound design, and we have an Ableton class April 11th on a weekend starting up. If you guys are interested, sign up at sf.garnishmusicproduction.com. We have a 25% discount by using the code 25OFF. Okay, so it's for only the people that got through an hour and a half webinar are going to hear that or see it. So 25 off. And thanks again to the panelists, and really look forward to working with you guys post-pandemic. We can all meet up and crack a beer open at the studio. I love Hyde Street too, RoAn, so thanks for representing over there. That's actually where I did my last album of the Bay Area, was at Hyde Street.
With my mentor, Scott, right?
Scott McDowell, yeah.
Yeah.
So awesome, you guys. I'm going to take it out with a little bit of a thing here, and I'll see you guys in the near future. Please contact us at sf.garnishmusicproduction.com for Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, Digital Audio Workstations, mixing and mastering, sound design, production program, academy program. It's year-round, and we're here for you. Thanks so much.